On Twitter, which I don't suggest for anyone to ever do, but sometimes you have to test your chops the best way that you can, or the most available way that you can. This one kind of fell into my lap. So this was on the topic of papal infallibility. And I said, the burden proof is on you if you're going to make the claim, which he did, which the claim was up here. Knowing that papal infallibility disagrees with Scripture, which interpretation have you been using? So, down here, after I said, you said they disagree, the burden of proof is yours, said Peter was not infallible. He was condemned by Scripture and corrected by Paul. Jesus himself warns against calling anyone infallible. That part is irrelevant. In Acts 17, the Bereans are condemned for testing Paul against Scripture, meaning Paul is not infallible. This is a very hidden trick that Protestants attempt to do, and I used to do all the time when I was Protestant until I realized the logical consistency. If you are being logically consistent in this, you have to say that Peter was not infallible and Paul was not infallible. Therefore, how can we trust what they said? And what they said was 70% of the New Testament. What gives them the authority to speak about doctrine and morals and faith? Well, I would say that Jesus gave that to them when he breathed on them, and when Jesus selected Paul to be an apostle and write for the New Testament, which, by the way, they didn't know that they were writing the New Testament at the time. For the most part, they were writing letters to correct the church. They were giving them, as Moses did in the Old Testament, as Moses gave laws that were not directed, not directly spoken by God, on divorce and other things, as Jesus says himself in, I believe it is John 7. This is what Peter and Paul were doing now in the New Testament, as they were given the authority to do so, bind and loose, and they were breathed on by Jesus to give the authority. So when Peter speaks and Paul speaks, they are speaking, they are creating doctrine, and they are teaching infallibly. You notice Paul actually qualifies these things within his writing. He says, I am not speaking on the authority of Jesus as I do over here. I am speaking to my own accord here when he's talking about being single or getting married again. So he even qualifies it, which we see in papal infallibility, which we don't claim the Pope. The claim is not the Pope that goes out and speaks and 99% of what he says is infallible. Like, no, we know that that's not true. We know that's not a fact. There's been 3 times that the infallibility doctrine has even been invoked, and people think it's 100% topic where everything he says is true. No, that's not the doctrine. Go look it up. Educate before you make claims. And if, again, you want to make the claim that Peter and Paul were infallible, not infallible, then how do you reconcile what they are saying as Scripture? How do you trust what they say? If what they're saying doctrinally and teaching is not infallible, you cannot trust Scripture alone. You cannot trust Scripture at all. So I'm going to make the claim that they were infallible when speaking on doctrine, moral, and faith, as we saw in Moses and we see today. And if you want to disagree with that and call them infallible, then you can raise questions of the authority of Scripture.